Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Stock Market Picks. Today we have a special guest, Fernando Moreira. Fernando is a portfolio manager at Afrifocus Securities and has been for quite a long time. Just a quick disclaimer, please note that the views and opinions given in this chat are the views of the individual interviewed and not necessarily the views of Afrifocus. And please be aware that investing in the stock market can be risky. So let's get to it. Fernando, welcome to this week's edition.
Hi, good morning.
Good. So if you could maybe let's kick it off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history on the stock markets.
Thanks, Warren. Morning, everyone. Been in the market probably too long. I started way back in 1987. Ironically, my first official day was actually the 19th of October, which became known as Black Monday.
Wow.
I started off in the back office, as it was known then, as credit controller, and it was certainly a good lesson for the rest of the years to come. It was
a baptism of fire.
A baptism of fire. But that's what happens in stock markets.
Wow.
That's interesting. I basically started off in the back office. In those days, you had to virtually do all aspects of stock broking. And then slowly I moved forward as assistant portfolio manager as I became more interested in actual portfolio management and speaking to clients. And then gradually became a portfolio manager.
Sure. Wow. And how long have you been with Afrifocus for?
I've been roughly with Afrifocus since its inception by a couple of months. So that's possibly now 20 odd years.
20 odd years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
sure.
Been around the block.
That's awesome. And I think during this year's Stockbrokers Award, you were voted 5th in the country.
Yeah, 5th.
Fantastic. And 2 years ago,
2 or 3 years ago.
2 or 3 years, number 2.
Or 3, yeah.
Three.
Doesn't mean anything.
No, that's great.
Following years probably lost.
So you've got lots of years of experience in the market and a long history with Afrifocus, about 20 years or so. That's fantastic. So let's move on to just talking about the markets. Was there anything last week that sort of stood out for you?
Yeah, I think last week what really stood out was the rebound in some of our platinum counters on the back of a recovery in the palladium in the basket PGM, and we saw these downbeaten platinum counters really stage quite an amazing comeback within the space of 3 trading days. Some in the excess of 20%. So it was actually quite dramatic and a positive bounce for portfolios, and good to see the currency recovering slightly after being beaten down.
Sure. Do you think there's any catalyst for that move in the platinum price?
I didn't see anything, any catalyst. As many times these things, you'll only find out the catalyst after the event.
Yeah.
The shares were very oversold, so maybe that in itself was already a signal that a lot had been negative news had already been priced into these counters. And as soon as a lot of bad news is priced in, or supposedly priced in, your chances of a rally are more in your favor if anything positive does come out.
Yeah, maybe a bit of bottom fishing.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, could be. Cool, thanks for that. And so next question, are there any JSE listed large company picks that you like at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's one or two that one can look at, especially if you're a bit patient. Cashbuild has fallen out of favor, albeit that recently they've gone ex-dividend 20 Rand. So I think it's a top quality business. There could be concerns around those sort of businesses that have benefited from this lockdown period that we've had with the home renovations and also renovations down in and rebuild going on in Natal as people had to rebuild their businesses and infrastructure from the terrible looting that we've seen. But there might be fears now that with inflationary fears starting to be built in, and consumers are going to be under strain, and that the amount of spend on rebuild and renovation will be less. But I think on a price earnings of around 8 or 9 and a decent dividend yield, incredible track record, very stable management, no debt or very little debt, hugely cash generative. I think at these sort of low levels, I think you could, for the patient investor, you could be really handsomely rewarded.
Great, Cashbuild, excellent. Thanks, Fernando. And then the next one, are there any small companies listed on the JSE that you're looking at?
I don't try and differentiate between small or big. I think it always goes with what you're investing in. On the smaller sort of companies, I think a speculative one, it's got a very checkered history, but I think if a few things move into its favor, there could be a re-rating of the company, and that could be EOH. The story around it has been pretty awful, but I do think they've got a really good management, Stephen van Coller now. I think if they're able to convince government that they keep their business with government and hopefully control their debt, which has been a problem, and their legacy issues, and they put themselves in a position to get rewarded their Microsoft license that they lost. There could be a catalyst that your risk reward could be in your favor. I don't think it's one for retirement or anything like that, but you could be rewarded if those factors come into play.
Okay, so not for widows and orphans, but if the stars align and they get that Microsoft license again, it's
the share price rewarded.
Take off.
Could be rewarded.
Okay, EOH, interesting, thanks. And then just looking overseas in the offshore markets, is there anything on the US or any other markets that take your pants?
I don't really follow. I mean, we all know big names, but I don't profess to know anything about the intricacies of those offshore companies. But I think if I was to choose, I would go and invest offshore. I think the S&P is a good start, albeit that's now weighted to the big IT stocks. I think these things work out over the long term. If I was to choose companies offshore, I would stay with sort of moat companies that have proven themselves over time. Notwithstanding companies like Colgate could be something to consider. Your Microsofts. I think these are companies that have withstood many fads in the market and many downturns and upturns. And I think they'll stand you in good stead over time, and they tend to pay good dividends along the way.
Great.
I'd also consider companies in Europe like Nestle. Incredible company. You have had a company that has paid very good dividends, but also the currency has been in your favor because it's in a very strong currency as well. So a very good rand, never mind rand hedge, but I think just a very good stable currency, I think stands it in good stead.
Yeah, I guess all those three companies, Microsoft, Nestle, and Colgate, they're really quite dominant in their industries.
Correct.
That's always the sort of company you want to go for.
Probably Warren Buffett type of companies, I think.
Absolutely. And then is there any sort of short-term trading type of company or trade that you would look at?
I think that's the unfortunate part of our business, is that we are so short-term focused because of the want and pressures that we perceive and trying to get something, an idea every day. And that probably doesn't stand us in good stead. So no, you know, I think if things are cheap, you can treat it as a punt. But yeah, I try not to, you know, like last week, you might have been lucky to get something and look for overbought and oversold situations, which might help your trading strategy in shorting or buying when at the extremes, because at those extremes, I think it will just make your bet maybe a little bit better. But I think it's important, Warren, you've been in the market a long time. I think whether it's a short-term punt or long-term investment, I think be comfortable with the name that you've chosen.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and know the business well, I guess.
Yeah, as well as can be, because I think once you start trading in areas or with counters you don't really have a feel for, I think it'll make the decision to exit or enter just a little harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. So I guess that leads me into the next question. And in your experience, what would you say is the best way to make money on the stock market?
Patience.
Patience. A one-word answer. I like this. But I absolutely agree with that. I think, yeah, the patient investors over time seem to do the best, and things like unbundling. I guess if you're patient enough, there might be an unbundling, and you know, whereas you used to have one company, now you've got two companies, and the share price of both of them grow over time.
Yeah, businesses over time, I think, will do better than cash in the bank. Businesses will grow, ingenuity, technology. So just be patient.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I agree with that. And then how can people contact you if they want to get in touch with you?
I think the best way, like for us, is obviously contact Afrifocus Securities. 290-7800 is the landline. My direct line is 290-7826, obviously Johannesburg. Obviously on my cell, 083-320-8170.
Fantastic. Well, great, Fernando.
Glad to assist.
Excellent. So, yeah, thank you so much for that, Fernando.
Pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
And your
Very good.
pearls of wisdom, and we really do appreciate that, guys. If you want to chat to Fernando, give him a shout, or pop him an email or a call. And thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please pass it on to anyone you know that might find it interesting or helpful or useful, and get in touch with us if you have any questions. Until next week, hope you have a great week on the markets, and that they treat you kindly. See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.